All right, guys, this is Mr. Reagan. I'm here with two former FBI agents. These guys are not just regular FBI agents. These guys are decorated, agents high up in the agency. Mark, I know you worked in the D.C. office directly for Mueller.
Right.
Frank, I don't know who you worked for exactly. You guys, but you guys have both taught FBI agents. You guys have both worked in the field. You guys have, I know, Frank, you investigated murders, like crazy stuff. I mean, you guys have been in it. You guys have been doing the work. You guys know the inside. You know the outside. You know everything about the FBI. And right now, I think the country is kind of worried, right? Because we see there is this either unbelievable corruption in Washington, D.C., what Dinesh D'Souza recently called the Machiavellian theory of what's going on in D.C., either corrupt or totally incompetent. Now, for my money, it looks like corruption because it seems like every single possible thing that can go wrong is going wrong for America. It seems almost as if everything that's been happening is so corrupt that it couldn't possibly happen unless certain players within the Washington, D.C. system decided it was going to happen. And what I'm specifically talking about right now is, of course, Afghanistan. So I don't know which one of you guys wants to go first. News broke early this morning that we would probably have some casualties. There was like a high possibility of danger out there in Afghanistan. And now we've heard that there have, in fact, been some deaths out there in Afghanistan. This whole thing, unbelievable quagmire. I tweeted today, early this morning, I like to see Democrat politicians humiliated, of course. But I don't, this is too much. You do not want American lives endangered because of the incompetence of your administration. You don't want them in danger because of some kind of corruption in the system. Somebody has some kind of an idea of what they want. Oh, let's make Afghanistan look bad. My theory is maybe somebody in the military-industrial complex was like, if we make this withdrawal look bad, we'll never want to withdraw from another occupation ever again. So let's make it a total mess. That was my original thought when I saw this because it's just so disastrous. Now, you guys have a much better insight than I do. You have much better insight than the rest of us. So why don't I let you guys go? I don't know who wants to talk first about this, but why don't you let me know what you guys think is going on in Afghanistan, and what you think is going on. Do you think it's corruption or do you think it's incompetence?
Frank, did you want to kick it off?
Well, I think it's a combination of not so much corruption. It's certainly incompetence. Was this planned? Yes and no. The plan was to get out of Afghanistan and to have a big photo op in a political, moment for Biden on 9/11 to say, I got you out of a 20-year war that was unpopular. Look at me, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. The problem is they never even thought one moment about how to do it. They didn't care. He didn't care. And the people beneath him that are supposed to care and be the wise counsel to say, hey, hold on a second, we need to do this, didn't, because they're more concerned about their career and their job than doing the right thing. So, yeah, I think it's more incompetence. And a certain level, I guess you could call it corruption. I call it just, political careerism taking over and just being, what expediently works for them.
Right. Okay. Mark, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. And I agree with everything that Frank just said. And for those of you that haven't heard our podcast, whether it's mine, The Mark Vine Show, or Frank's, which is called Lies People Tell, we actually did a podcast episode where Frank and I talked about this. And this is well before Afghanistan started. What you have is there's been a complete culture shift over the years, not just in the FBI, which is certainly true, but across all of Washington. Frank and I was a naval officer. Frank was an Army officer around the same period, in the late 80s, early 90s. And back in those days, it was it was really understood that people that went into the military or law enforcement were by and large conservative people. And in addition to that, conservatives, however, people that took an oath to the United States Constitution and were apolitical, because I can tell you in my entire career, I was apolitical. Frank's career, entirely apolitical.
And that's critical because sometimes
Absolutely.
you're going to invest a Democrat, sometimes you're investigate a Democrat, sometimes you're going to investigate a Republican, and you
Absolutely.
have
Absolutely.
a bias.
And that's vital, and it's important to understand where I'm leading. And I.
Oh, you're kind of breaking up there for 1 second. You want to repeat that?
What I noticed over the years, particularly over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years in the FBI, but not just the FBI, but across the government, is that it really people came in with a political agenda and very left-leaning political agenda, which was
Well, we have to learn about white rage, Mark.
well, we'll talk about that a little bit. But I'll tell you, it's really politics has really permeated the agencies, the FBI, and as you can see now, the military, and we're paying a dear price for that. And
Mark, you were in the Navy for many years before you joined the
I was in the
FBI.
Navy for 8 years. I was a naval officer for 8
And
years.
you've actually told me that there used to be anyway a distinction between how you get ahead in the military and how you get ahead in the FBI. And what
Yes.
you told me was that how you get in the head of the military is merit, is
Yes.
qualifications.
Yes.
How you get ahead in the FBI is politics.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Frank, you want to address? And again, we did an entire podcast on that. But Frank, you want to give the shot at that because there's a and a lot of people compare the FBI promotion system to the military promotion system, and they are not alike at all.
Couldn't be further from the
Right.
the truth. The difference is stark. In the military, I was in the Army for 10 years. It was merit based. You either made it or you didn't, and you got assigned tougher, assignments, and you had to meet the medal.
War colleges,
Right.
staff colleges, things like that.
And in the FBI, it's a matter of raising your hand. Do you raise your hand are you willing to go to Washington, D.C.? Are you willing to go to headquarters? Are you willing to move? And if you are willing to do that, you could be the most incompetent shrub in the world. You're going to get promoted because you're willing to do it. Now, I came in, in 95, and at that point, the highest calling you could have, and that was the understanding, was to be an FBI agent, a working street agent, putting bad guys away.
Right.
Somewhere around 2001, when Mueller took over, it took a very much more of a corporatist attitude, and no longer was the street agent the pinnacle of what you're supposed to be striving for. Now it became, how quickly could you get to headquarters? And headquarters at the FBI exploded in size under Mueller, and it has continued to increase. And it really became the investigator. It became, before Mueller, it was like, why would you go to headquarters? After Mueller is, why wouldn't you go to headquarters?
Right.
Did you guys say that before Mueller, the FBI was a much more locally based agency?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you'd have like the California FBI, you'd have the Oregon FBI, etc. And then once Mueller took over, he was like, let's centralize this thing.
Yeah.
And concentrate the power in D.C.
Yep.
But keep in mind, when I say Mueller, you have to link Mueller with 9/11 because they came 1 week apart. Mueller took over a week before 9/11, and that was such a shock to the system that
there needed to be some change, maybe, or there was at least the feeling that there needed to be some change.
Right. There was a case of, we have to change for the sake of change to a certain degree, but we also had a lot of issues that we needed to address. The problem is that they threw the baby out with the bathwater, and Mueller was like, well, everything you guys did before was no good, so let's not keep any of that. We're going to start fresh and do it this way. Well, unfortunately, a lot of those old cases, a lot of those old investigators actually knew how to develop sources, gain intelligence, and knew how to work a case.
Thanks.
And that became blasé. Well,
I lost you there for a second, Frank.
It became
Mark,
somewhat.
can I hear you?
Yeah.
Can you
hear me?
You still got me?
Yeah, but I've got some kind of thing going on. Give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
You got me now?
Hello?
Yeah, but okay, sorry. I had something started playing on my headphones, and I was totally distracted. Okay, the wife brought me more coffee. I'm ready to go.
Hey,
I think we got things
and keep
going.
in mind that from the very beginning, along with everything that Frank is saying, is Mueller had an inherent distrust of agents. And not
Yeah.
only did he bring in the corporate attitude, he actually brought people from the corporate world into the highest levels of the FBI.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
Yeah.
that because what was Mueller before he was DOJ, right, or something like that?
He would
He
do
was,
it.
he was DOJ. He was a U.S. attorney out in California, and it's funny because a friend of mine who became an agent, he was in San Francisco where Mueller was the U.S. attorney, and at that time he worked for INS. He was an agent with INS, and they had a big case there, and they all had lunch after the big trial, and Mueller was there, and my friend had just got accepted to become an FBI agent. And so Mueller said, "Oh, you're going to be an FBI?" He says, "That's my dream job." He says, "To be an agent?" He said, "No, to be the director of the FBI." And then he became the director of the FBI. but you know, his outlook was just so different.
I think I've lost you again. There we go. You're back. For some reason it keeps dropping. Did you get that, Mark?
No,
Did
I
Frank
had
drop
him.
off for you. Okay,
I had him.
maybe it's just
Yeah.
me. Sorry, guys.
But
sorry, keep talking. I already
But the culture of the FBI was so different from his outlook, and he did look at like 9/11 was your guys' fault, so we're gonna fix everything you guys broke, which was not really the case.
No, and I think Mark, you said that he was much more fond of the CIA and the way their
and intel
agency was structured.
Yes,
and whatnot.
and not only that, and it went beyond more fond of the CIA, but understand when Frank and I went into the FBI, it was, and I've often used this description that we were more of a law enforcement organization that dabbled in counterintelligence. And then later, we became a counterintelligence organization that dabbled in criminal work. And
Absolutely.
with that, like if you go over to the CIA, the CIA is a very analyst-driven organization, okay? Historically, the FBI has been a very agent-centric organization with some analysts. Now, there are, you know what, I'd have to run the numbers. I actually think there's more analysts than there are agents, and it is definitely not an agent-centric organization anymore. And in fact, Mueller, one of the things that he did, his legacy was he brought people from the corporate world into the organization, and not just into the FBI, but to the highest levels, like assistant directors were people from the corporate world, and it changed everything in the analysts. And then they started training, like if you go down to Quantico, analysts are now trained alongside agents, and because it's like considered the same job description now, and they've really kind of backed off of the gun carrying law enforcement mentality that really is what the FBI is. FBI agents are basically, they are law enforcement, sworn law enforcement officers with arrest authority. So to me, it was always
federal police officers.
Yeah, you're a federal police officer now, but that's going to be critical, Chris, later on when we start talking about some of the missteps that the FBI has done. Because when you are a law enforcement officer, there's certain things that you have to know. There's certain things that you do, and there's a lot of things that you can't do. And everything has to be juxtaposed through the Constitution, rules of evidence, procedures, and things along
Which
those
doesn't
lines.
seem to be what they're following anymore.
No,
but let me
because
pivot
of
back.
that mentality, that shift in mentality.
Let me pivot back real quick to Afghanistan, because you talked about how there's a difference between the merit-based job promotional system in the military versus the political-based promotion system in the FBI. But at the top levels, Congress has to approve, the top generals, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and things like this. So that becomes political at a certain point as well, too, correct?
Very political, yeah.
I mean, because Milley is an unbelievably political guy. His whole I want to learn about white rage BS, and Lloyd Austin as well. I believe he came from the private sector. And the question I have really is, I would like to get you guys' insight in what the hell is going on in Afghanistan. Because, like I said, many of us pundits speculating suspect that maybe this has something to do with the military-industrial complex wanting to stay in foreign wars. And to some degree, some of the people in D.C. may be complicit in having, wanting to see a quagmire, wanting to see this become a disaster. You're not quite so cynical, it sounds like. But I'm curious then, if you don't think it's that, what do you think it is? Why the hell are we having this trouble? Because Donald Trump said it beautifully when he was on stage. He said a 5-year-old can figure this out. You take out our civilian personnel. You clear out the prisons so that they can't just like release the terrorists that were being held in the prisons there. You take out all of our military technology from the country so that they don't get their hands on the military technology, right? You pull out all your resources, you pull out all your human resources, and then you pull out your military. What they did seemed to be like, all right, guys, we're leaving, and then left everything there for the Taliban to just take.
Including people, yeah.
Including human beings, human lives, which are now being lost currently. Today is the worst day, it looks like. Can you guys speak on that and tell us what
there's probably, I think they left as much equipment. There's probably more equipment there than many armies have in Europe right now.
Yeah. You're 100 billions of dollars, they said. Billions of dollars.
Yeah, it's some very high-tech stuff. Well, I think you have a deadly combination of, you ever have a boss that thinks they're absolutely brilliant and they know everything, they're the smartest guy in the room, and they don't want to really listen to anybody's opinion. Hey, tell me what you think, is so they can discard it immediately. Yeah. That's Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And then couple that with...
But come on, Frank, are you really telling me you think Joe Biden is in any way in control of anything?
Well, I'm saying that he made that decision like, no, I want them out. I want them out.
Sure, regardless. But he was definitely told that was the decision that needed to be made.
Well, no, I think that he calculated.
So you think he has some control? Because I'm not sure, Frank. You disagree on that.
See, I don't give him. I'm not going to give him the out to say he's mentally incompetent, because that would be too easy to say. Well, he just doesn't know what he's doing. I think he knew exactly what he was doing as far as a political stunt. I just don't think he cared enough to say, okay, how do we do this the right way? Mm-hmm. He was that boss saying, just get it done, and but they have to get out at this time. And people may have or may not have said, hey, boss, we can't do it that way. You don't know. I mean, he may rule in such a way that they're afraid to disagree with. I don't know. I know that they.
I mean, I'm following what you're saying, and I think what you're saying is totally plausible. I just think that you're putting onto Biden what maybe should be put on somebody else who's made the decision and then told Biden to make the decision. It seems to me that if you think about what was Biden before he was elected, right? He was unbelievably corrupt. We saw his corruption in Ukraine. We saw his corruption in China. We saw the corruption of his son. It seemed to me that he was totally compromised. He seemed to be totally incompetent. The way he was making speeches, sometimes he would slur words, and people are chalking that up to stuttering. Oh, he's stuttering. That was not stuttering. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a BS thing to make him look sympathetic. The guy has some kind of brain problem, right? Some kind of deterioration. So it seemed to me that he was the perfect. If you wanted a puppet president, he's the guy.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So if he's a puppet president, then we got to put all what you're saying, Frank. We got to put that all on somebody else. Maybe Obama. Somebody.
So Chris, let me jump in.
Well, hold on, Mike.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but by that extension, then we'd have to say he makes absolutely no decisions.
That's my assertion.
I think he makes some. I think he made this decision, and I think he just didn't care about the ramifications or the long-term effects. He was that guy, just fix it. You know?
Well, I'll tell you what. None of us are actually in the White House. None of us are
Right.
actually witnessing what's going on. So you may be totally right, Frank. I'm not going to say you're wrong. We can only speculate by what we see.
Right.
And you may be right. There may be some decisions that he is, for whatever reason, able to make. Talking to Mark, and we're going to skip ahead here because originally I wanted to ask this question a little later, but I'm going to because we seem to be sliding into this direction. Mark and I have talked about this, and we're trying to figure out who is in charge. Who is running the country at the moment. And I'm curious what you guys think, because I do think that on at least some issues, I think the FBI doesn't just have influence, they have some degree of control at this point. I'm not talking about the regular agents. I'm talking about, the guys at the top level. I think, Pelosi has a lot of influence, if not some control. I think that there are some Wall Street people, some, bankers and whatnot that have some control. But at the end of the day, Mark and I were talking about this, and it looks like there may be some control, some leverage that's still maintained in some way by Barack Obama. Somehow, because he's got all his people in there, and he lives right down the street from the White House, weirdly. First president to do that in like 200 years or something crazy like that. And so it looks like maybe Obama's running a lot. I did a video about this recently. Mark kind of convinced me of that. Curious what you think about that, Frank. Sorry to skip over you, Mark. We'll get back to you here in one second. But I'm curious what you think about that, because you and I have talked about it, Mark, but I haven't talked to you, Frank, about this.
Well, I think 100%. I think he controlled not only the presidency, but the campaign and the selection of the VP. There's a reason why Susan Rice is in there. There's a reason why Kamala Harris is there. And it wasn't because Biden said, something, I really would like someone that everyone dislikes, couldn't even make it to the first caucus, and I want to make her VP. That was a decision taken out of his hands. Susan Rice, putting her in charge, and I think she's running a lot of the show, her and Valerie Jarrett, behind the scenes. That was an Obama decision also. So, yeah, the Obamas have an extreme amount of influence on this administration and what goes on.
Can I just jump in here before I get your take on it, Mark?
Yeah.
I want to just explain the deep state real quick, because the deep state isn't some mysterious conspiracy theory the way I think of it. To me, the deep state is just all the powerful players in D.C. or in New York City or these areas that have significant influence on the presidency and on the federal government generally, Congress and whatnot. This is the deep state. It's not some mysterious thing. It's thousands of people who have, who either work in or control companies, billionaires, all these different people that aren't elected, but also people potentially in the FBI or the military who have some degree of leverage over the president or leverage over, congressmen, or some kind of influence, some kind of what I would call like too great of influence, right? Influence that maybe crosses over sometimes into control. And to me, that is a very dangerous thing, because once you have people who control these offices that are not elected officials, then we are undermining our democracy. And so that's what we call the deep state. It's not some kind of mysterious thing. We all know there's influence from these outside sources. So the question just is how much influence. You got to have influence, right? You have to have, of course, you're going to have advisors. Of course, you're going to have people from the outside, whispering in people's ears, politicians' ears all the time. That's been happening since the dawn of time. The question is it undue influence? Is it too much? Is it so much influence that it's control? And is it undermining the choices that the American public have made, what the American public wants? And I think that we're definitely at that level. I think it exploded during the Trump era because Trump was an outsider. He wasn't controlled by any of these people. They all freaked out. They said we need to be more firm. We need to have even more power. We need to have more control. And now I think it's gone kind of out of control. But do you guys recognize that as a good definition of the deep state, or am I a little bit off?
Well, yeah. Let me jump in here a minute on that, because just go with what we know in the press. Forget about anything behind the scenes and secret. Just take what we know is in in the press, talking about the deep state, because I think a lot of people, when we say deep state, it becomes sort of conspiratorial. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay, let's stick with the facts here. Okay, and tell me where I'm wrong in this. Did the FBI repeatedly falsify information on the FISA warrant to go after certain individuals? Yes, they did.
Well, that's right. You're talking about the Trump administration in 2016, while they were still campaigning, before he was elected president. They were trying to undermine Trump's campaign by saying Russian collusion,
right,
and then spying on people involved in the Trump campaign, gathering information.
James Comey not go on television and lay out essentially an indictment against Hillary Clinton, and then say that he unilaterally made a decision to not indict her? Did he not do that?
Well, what he specifically said is, I think something like, no reasonable prosecutor would would prosecute these crimes, which to me was insane.
But that's not his position to do that.
No,
that's not his position to do that. And James Comey was not an FBI agent. A lot of people don't know that the FBI director, it can be like Louis Freeh had been an agent, but James Comey was not an agent, and it seems like the general public didn't understand it. Yeah, he was never an agent. Okay, and so he made that decision. All right, that is not the role of the FBI director to do that. Then you had the email scandal with Hillary Clinton, that was not pursued. Hunter Biden's laptop, which there's just what's been in the press is damning evidence about corruption within the Biden family. Where has that gone? Where's the Durham report? On and on and on. And so when we look at this and we put it back to back, the only thing that you can do is sit back and say, obviously there's influence, because these non-elected officials, James Comey was not an elected official, Andy McCabe was not an elected official, Peter Strzok was not an elected official, but they had enormous influence in damaging Donald Trump, which ultimately affected the election, and here we are today. Now, but to answer your real quick question, one quick response to you, Chris, and that was this: who's making the decisions? Joe Biden. I do believe that Joe Biden is making decisions, but I think that people that he's beholden to are pressuring him, and that could include Barack Obama and others across the government, are saying this is what we want to have happen.
They're directing him to make the,
and they're making him make those decisions. But I'll tell you where my real problem is, Chris. My real problem is this: this man was going to be a disaster. I knew it. We all knew that when he went into office. I didn't think it was going to be this bad, this fast. But where and if you're a general or you're an admiral or you're somebody at the highest echelons of our Defense Department, State Department, FBI, so on and so forth, what's going on in Afghanistan right now, I hold you guys responsible for that, because I could not imagine being a flag level officer and listening to these decisions that are being made and knowing that Americans and Afghans were going to die as a result of these decisions and not pushing back on it. And then when the decision was made to not resign, why did you not resign when you were given these marching orders? People resigned under Trump for much less than this.
Well,
and now we're paying a price.
And people need to get fired right now.
And when you think about it, how many times did we hear these high-level people in the military and the various agencies squeal about how they're going to resign, they're going to do this and going to do that during Trump? And of course, it was all talk because they never did. I don't hear any of these guys saying they're going to resign now.
Nothing. Mark, you kind of went into a direction that I wanted to go anyway. And to me, this is incredibly important. Obviously, the Russiagate scandal, the dossier,
right?
I don't remember the guy's name, Carmela or something like that.
Carter Page?
No, I'm talking about the guy who forged the CIA document that said Carter Page is not.
Kleinsmith.
Right.
The attorney.
Obviously, that guy is a total scapegoat.
And that was not a mess up. He did that on purpose. He played.
Of course he did it, but he was ordered to do that by somebody. That guy should never have been the guy that went to court and with that. I mean, all these guys should be in prison. It's of course ridiculous. We know that the FBI was corrupt at that level at that time.
And he was not an agent, by the way. He was
no. He was a lawyer.
He was right. A lawyer. Well, we have FBI agent lawyers, but he was a headquarters attorney. In fact, I don't think he'd even been in the FBI that long. And but
he was a scapegoat. They broke him a deal. They said, "Look, you're going to take the heat for this. We're going to get you out of it," which they did.
Right.
And they just said, and none of it. We're all going to We'll be fine. But
In fact, I understand he pled to a misdemeanor, which I want you to think about. I want you to think about what he did.
Yeah.
What
this is worse than Watergate, guys. This is worse than Watergate.
And he pled to a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Now imagine this. He falsified documents and presented them to a federal judge more than once, destroying the life of Carter Page.
Yeah. And
think
attempting
about that.
to destroy
if you're
the
watching this
campaign,
show right now, and if
to me,
that
it's
were
worse.
you,
destroying the life of Carter Page is terrible.
Right.
But it's not detrimental to the country. What is detrimental to democracy is when you try to derail a political campaign using the FBI. The FBI to try to position somebody you want in. The FBI wanted a specific person in office.
Yes, they did.
And they wanted to keep Trump out. So at that time with Comey and all his gang, we know that the FBI was corrupt at the top levels because they were engaged in corrupt activities. The question I have, since they've been moved out, I think a lot of people thought, oh, it was just Comey and his gang. But since then, we have I don't know how familiar you guys are with this, but Revolver has put out a couple of articles. One about the Gretchen Whitmer plot. Do you guys know about this, the kidnapping?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And how the FBI, in fact, essentially entrapped everybody that was involved in that Whitmer plot. It was a bunch of FBI informants, a bunch of FBI agents who came up with this plot and seemed to be grooming guys that they thought might be extremists to work with them to try to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. And once one of these guys was like, I mean, okay, I guess, they said, aha, you're a terrorist. You need to go to prison, right? They essentially entrapped this guy, a few guys. And it looks like, if you read the Revolver report, it looks like they did the same thing on January 6th. They had FBI agents, or FBI informants anyway, at the top levels of all of these militia groups and, like the Proud Boys is not a militia group, but, the Proud Boys. These different organizations had FBI informants at the very top levels, and they were feeding them instructions to try to recommend radical action on January 6th. And it looks like the January 6th protesters that were involved in those groups, they're trying to throw the book at them, trying to say, oh, you guys were, obviously they've come out with leaks now with, I think it was Reuters, that says that the FBI is now saying, oh, there was nothing, there was no plot, there was nothing, nobody did anything wrong. But they've arrested hundreds of people. People are rotting in prison right now. This is like we're like living in friggin', China or Cuba or Venezuela now. We're just arresting, political dissidents and putting them in prison forever. Like literally people have been in prison for months. Months. That's a violation of the Constitution right there. Quick and speedy trial or whatever it is, right? If you don't give citizens their trial quickly, that can actually result in a mistrial, or exoneration. Because you're messing the whole thing up. Like you're just keeping them in prison for too long. These guys have all been in prison for too long, way too long. So to me, it's like, well, no, it wasn't just Comey. And so the question I have for you guys is, at least at the top levels, is the FBI still corrupt?
Frank, did you want to address that?
I think the problem is, I don't know if I can't say that they're corrupt because I really don't know the players at the top, with the exception of Christopher Wray. And I think he was a bad selection for director because what they needed was a reformer. They needed someone to come in and reform the agency because it completely lost its way in a lot of different ways. But the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and the Clinton email scandal really threw back the curtain to show how far off we had wandered from our real mission. When you talk about the Whitmer case in Michigan, I've done a lot of undercover operations, and Mike has also. I've ran a lot of different sources, and the key is this, and this is really the crux of it. When you're dealing with a source or you're dealing with an undercover operation, You have to let them come along. But you have to target guys that are predisposed to do something. You cannot take a leadership role in the operation and say, "Hey guys, let's go blow this place up."
Now, but what you're saying is how you're supposed to do it,
right?
But it doesn't appear that that's how it happened.
Well, I agree. I think that they took far too active a role. Whenever you take a leadership position like their source did in the Whitmer case, he became like the leader of the operation. Exactly. At that point, you're directing the actions more than observing and
that
gathering
becomes
intel.
Entrapment. Am I wrong?
It can, but it's a little nuance because you have the Attorney General guidelines, which allows for a certain amount of illegal activity to take place as long as it's been vetted and approved. But you cannot.
Which is fine. I'm all for undercover finding out about these people being extremists and having these. Thank you, Donnie. And having these intentions. But if they didn't have the intention before it was suggested to them, then that's entrapment.
See, that's the key. You have to make sure that they are predisposed and that you're not convincing them. And as you're going along, even if they're predisposed, and they say, "I want to do this," and then at the end they say, "I don't want to do it." Yeah. You can't get them. You can't try to talk them into it because now you are entrapping them. You're trying to direct their actions. It has to be somewhat passive because you're in that position to gather information, to gather evidence, to gather intel of what they're doing, what their plans are, and you will play the role of helping to facilitate maybe. But you won't get them explosives. But if they say, "Hey, do you know where we can get some explosives?" You say,
it looks like in the Whitmer case anyway, the explosives were provided by the FBI, and they were encouraged to go pick them up from another agent.
What you're supposed to do, this was a crime that these people, the way that it's supposed to happen is they were planning on doing this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you introduce a source or you introduce an undercover agent, and then they then become part of the organization that was already predisposed to a criminal act.
I should take that back with the explosives. I don't know if there was explosives in the Whitmer case, but everything involved, it seemed like was being supplied.
But all the way along the way, what you're supposed to be doing, everything about this has to be the idea of the suspect. Of the subject,
right. Yeah.
Okay, and while you're doing this, and I've done these operations.
Did you guys read the Revolver articles about this?
Yeah, we did.
We did. Okay.
And the thing is that what you're supposed to do.
Sorry, continue.
Well, hold on one second. But what you're supposed to do is give them an option to not commit the crime, thereby demonstrating this was their idea. They were not being encouraged. They were not being pressured to do that.
And so, what's your read on that? Because if you've read the article. And you guys know how it's supposed to work. You guys seem like you're totally confident this is how it's supposed to work.
Yep.
Do you think it worked like that in the Whitmer case?
No, I think that the agents and the people running it became overzealous. They gave probably bad direction to their sources and let them go further than they were. But you got to remember, that Whitmer case is a huge case. Okay, that's a huge case not only for the case agent.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only a huge case for the case agent, but also everyone in his chain of command, because they're all going to be dining off that case for many years in their career. This is, if you're a field supervisor, this case is probably going to get you 2 or 3 promotions. You know what I mean?
And to some degree, it's going to make some of the people famous, at least within the agency.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So they get that as as they say, the horse got its bit in the mouth and they couldn't stop it because they got so excited they were going to make this case.
But here's the thing, Frank, nobody was aware of this kind of corruption until that Revolver article came out. And that article didn't come out until way after January 6th.
Absolutely.
So it looked to me like that might have been a precedent. Oh, we went this far already. It's sort of like... This sounds kind of vulgar. Well, I'm not going to get into that, but you know what I mean? Like, if a girl's gone a certain, done certain things, she's like, well, I might as well go all the way.
Right.
I kind of feel like maybe that's what happened with the FBI, right? They got involved in the Whitmer case. They said, okay, maybe we went too far here, but hell, we've already done it. Let's try to apply those same tactics on January 6th. Do you guys think that's possible? I mean, I know you guys weren't in the FBI at the time January 6th happened, but do you think maybe they went too far there as well? Like Revolver had suggested in their article.
Well, there's one thing, and Mike and I both saw this
Right.
when we read the Revolver article, and I haven't really heard anybody make this comparison. But when you read the article, Revolver, about how they stormed the Michigan State Capitol, and look at how they stormed the Capitol. If you read the article, they were expecting resistance from the cops, and all of a sudden, the cops basically stepped aside and let them come in, right?
Yeah.
Into the state capitol.
Exactly what
Very
happened on
much
January
like
6th. Yeah.
this January 6th. So is there a parallel? Was that a template? It certainly makes me question
looks
it.
like it. Yeah, it looks
it-
like it. Yeah, from the outside, it really looks like the FBI is going too far here in many of these instances. Anyway, sorry, Mark, you want to say?
You know, and I was going to say, and people forget that domestic terrorism cases are very, very specific. At FBI headquarters, this balance between your exercising your First Amendment protected speech and committing a crime, very careful in doing. In fact, the public oftentimes, you know, the Southern Poverty Law Center and some of the other groups that are out there were always contacting us and saying, hey, you know, this is a hate group out here, and this group is doing this, and we wouldn't. So they have leeway. They have a broad spectrum of people that they can call extremists, that the FBI will not necessarily call it extremists, because
depending on who's in charge of the FBI.
Exactly, and that's what I'm getting at. Is now, with the way that it's supposed to work is that just because you have views that are distasteful, and the Ku Klux Klan is a classic example of this. You know, in this country, you're allowed to have distasteful views and ideas. They can be horrible, but what makes a domestic terrorism case is that you plan on using your views, your ideology, to further that agenda through the use of overthrowing the government through the use of force and violence.
Right.
Now, you have to have those elements, okay? But because if you want to fly a swastika flag in front of your house or burn a cross down, that's distasteful, and I get legal.
But it's free speech.
But it's free speech. Now, when you try then use a weapon or you try to use violence to further your political agenda, that's another issue. Now, the question here, and this has always been the question,
crossing from free speech into criminality.
right? So in Michigan, so the question in Michigan and in January 6th in the Capitol, and this is the debate that still has not been settled because this is not a clear-cut case. Were the people storming the House in Michigan? Were these people actually storming the Capitol on January 6th? Because there are reports now, and I don't have all the answers to this. I'm going to tell you right up front, but there are claims that police officers were letting people into the Capitol building.
I saw the video.
I mean, I've seen the video. Yeah,
I've seen the
we've all
videos.
seen the video.
So were they using
were letting
force or
them in.
violence? And my question is, how many weapons were confiscated on January 6th? I mean, what kind of an insurrection do you do? One? Zero. Right. So
there was
were they
bear
using
spray.
force or violence?
There was bear spray. If you look it up, somebody wrote me and they were like, it was an armed insurrection. I mean, what do you mean armed? They wrote, there was bear spray.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll tell you what, guys, I've looked up
Yeah.
bear spray. I don't know if you guys know anything about bear spray. I've looked it up. The formulation of bear spray is actually less effective on people than your regular pepper spray that you would bring, like my wife has.
Right.
Bear spray isn't effective on humans, really.
And by
So
the way,
this
the question is, carrying that, is that illegal? Is it illegal to do that?
No.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, but
And also,
again,
the
it comes down
Capitol is
to a
often
domestic terrorism
open, by the way. I
case.
don't even know if it's trespassing, because the
I
Capitol
am
is
not
often
aware.
open to the public.
I am not aware of one weapon being, and if you have listeners that have information different than me, I'm not aware of one weapon that was confiscated.
No.
I'm only aware of one person that was killed that day by a firearm,
Yeah.
and that was an
And it was a
unarmed
Trump
female.
supporter. Yeah. And you
Right.
guys, I got a big question. Big question. Why the hell are these people still in prison? Why are they still rotting in jail waiting for trial?
That's a good
What's
question.
going on there?
I don't know. I mean,
This is completely unconstitutional. I mean, there's any way you look at it, I can't see any other explanation. This is unconstitutional. This is illegal. You can't do this.
right. There's no way to square that when you're letting people out that have committed violent crimes to up to manslaughter and murder, and they're getting bail, and that you're holding the guy for, solitary confinement for 6 or 8 months for trespassing, a federal misdemeanor. I mean, I've done a lot of cases in my career. I've never in my entire career ever charged anybody with a federal misdemeanor.
By the way, that's true with me as well. And I actually, not only did I never charge anybody with a federal misdemeanor, I don't know an agent that filed a federal
because it's a waste of your time.
Years.
Because it's a waste of your time.
Right.
We got other things to do.
The U.S. Attorney's Office wouldn't even entertain something like it. If you bring a charge like that to the U.S. Attorney's Office, they'd say, you have nothing better to do? You're bothering me.
So this is entirely political, is what you're saying. They wouldn't waste time with it.
Yeah,
I don't see what else it could be.
I think it's safe to say, yes, this is political. The holding these people for this long is political. If you want to arrest them, charge them, but they should be released on their own recognizance. They have not shown that they're a flight risk. They have not shown any violent tendencies. They're using, they use violent rhetoric. Well, violent rhetoric is I talk mean to somebody.
That is not illegal.
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
not illegal.
We got about 700 people in the chat. We're going to start taking questions here in a second, but I want to wrap up the interview part of this. Oh, my cat's going crazy. I have a Bengal, guys. They're very loud. Unless you have a really big house,
I thought that was a peacock.
Yes, my wife is strangling a peacock. No, we have this cat. So it costs us way too much money as well. It's not worth it. I'm allergic to cats, so I had to get this particular breed. But look, okay. So last question. This is another big one. This is another important one. How do we fix this? How do we fix the country? And do we think? Because I can tell you from personal experience, I have two good friends, two of my best friends in the whole world. Voted Democrat their whole life. They see what's going on in Afghanistan. They see what's going on with COVID and the new mandate, more mandates, more lockdowns. They see what's going on all over the country with what's going on in the federal government, shutting down oil pipelines, gas prices going up. They see all these problems, and they're saying, look, this is getting ridiculous. We can't keep voting for Democrats. Both of my diehard Democrat friends, and these are two of my best friends in the world, have both told me they're voting Republican from now on. And to me, that is a big shift. So I have some hope that in 2024, probably 2022 even, we're really going to see a shift. But I'm curious what you guys think needs to change here, because it does, I know you guys don't want to say there's corruption, but you don't have people rotting in prison for months at a time, being charged with misdemeanors, being charged with trespassing, absurd things like this, without some level of corruption there, right? Or at least influence from corrupt individuals from the outside. So how do we change the FBI? How do we change the federal government in a way to sort of fix the problems that are going on right now?
Mike, why don't you take it? I got to step away for just a moment, and then I'll chime in when I get back.
Okay, Frank. Okay.
He's going to go choke his peacock. His pet peacock.
Whoa, Mark, come on. I don't want to hear. That's revolting.
No, he's got some pet that he's got to go after. How did it change? So start with the FBI. We need. Frank started out talking about this.
I don't think Mark meant that quite as vulgar as it sounded.
No. He said that you had a pet peacock, and he's going to go choke.
No,
it's not meant to be vulgar at all. Not at all. No,
my God. It came across way worse than it was. Sorry. Let's bring this back.
I know where your mind's at.
So some sense of seriousness. Sorry.
Listen. When it comes to the FBI, we need a reformer, and you just need a clear house. Not just at the top level.
You mean get Christopher Wray out, bring in somebody who is
absolutely. And I will tell you this, that one of the best things, I had so much admiration for Donald Trump when he fired James Comey, and then ultimately the rest of the crew, McCabe and Strzok and Page and the rest of them. By the way, there were a lot of other people besides.
And it's really a shame he wasn't fired earlier, really.
Yes.
But I don't think Trump really
I'll
understood.
tell you, but what your listeners need to understand is what a gutsy move that was, because at the time, James Comey was very popular, not only in the FBI, but over on the Hill. And when he...
Oh, you mean just among policymakers?
Yes, absolutely. And even internally in the FBI. And I remember...
Why is that?
Well, hold on. Let me just finish
Okay, yeah.
this thought, and then I'll come back to that. I remember being at FBI headquarters, and the day that James Comey gave that speech, the famous speech where he read basically what should have been an indictment and then chose not to pursue it. I remember turning to some of my colleagues and I said, that man needs to be fired right now. He will. But amongst our group, it was, but he'll never be fired because he's too popular. Nobody in their right mind would fire a guy that's that popular. Well,
so Trump,
months later,
because he was an outsider.
Months later, though, I'm driving home from work, and a friend of mine called me up and he said, what did you think about, Comey? And I said, what are you talking about? I was on my way home from work and I hadn't listened to the news yet. And make a long story short, what had happened was my friend was calling me to tell me that Trump had fired James Comey, and I didn't see it coming, and I was shocked. I was stunned. But Trump gained my respect that day because, again, he was at that time very popular on the Hill, very popular amongst the professional support employees in the FBI, and it took somebody to go out on the limb and get rid of him, and he did. Now later,
Trump seemed never to care about making enemies.
But later we found out, even found Comey. Oh, you're
kind of breaking up. You want to say that again?
But here's the mistake. Okay? And if there's anybody in Trump world that's listening to me right now, here's what you need to understand. What Trump, and this is not his fault. He did not know the internal workings of the FBI. He didn't realize how deep this went. And if you get in office again, Mr. Trump, or anybody in your camp, you're going to have people that are on your staff that have spent time in the FBI, know the FBI, and know the inner workings of the FBI, because it is deep. And cutting off Comey, who was he was an appointed official. He was not a career FBI guy. He does not know the extent of the dirt. And you're going to have people that come in that know where it is and can come in and clean house. That's just the FBI. But you can go over to the agency, you can go over to the NSA, and it's the same over there. And over to DOD, you can see it the same way. But Trump, Mr. Trump, if you get in office again, or DeSantis, or whoever gets in, you need to bring people in that understand these organizations. And
you're saying when you cut out cancer, you got to cut out all the cancer.
Deep, absolutely.
See, for me, with Trump and Comey, the first mistake he made was he should have fired him immediately. Day one, he should have been gone.
Yeah, I don't think Trump was quite savvy enough about what was going on to know. He was outsider. He didn't really know.
Right. That was his first mistake. Here's the thing. Because no one was held accountable for Crossfire Hurricane and the Clinton email thing. No one was ever held accountable except Kleinsmith, right? He was the fall guy.
The fall guy. Exactly right. Yeah.
That's why see everything else happening. Because I tell you, if Bill Barr would have actually prosecuted some high-level people like McCabe, Comey, Strzok, and they'd have gone to prison, you wouldn't see a lot of stuff.
A message.
Oh yeah.
You got to send a
here's
message.
Guys, why didn't that happen? Because a lot of guys were really thinking Barr was the guy,
Barr
was such a disappointment.
Barr was not a white hat. Barr was. Let me give you my theory, and this is strictly my theory.
Okay.
Barr was a Trojan horse. Remember, Barr was a Bushy, right? He was a Bush guy from the first Bush. He was his AG.
And people got to remember, George Bush Sr., not everybody remembers this, was the head of the CIA.
Right.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
He was in the agencies.
He was.
So Barr was his AG. Barr hadn't stuck his head up in 20-some years. All of a sudden, he's like, I think this is outrageous. I need to come in and save the day and fix what I see as a complete injustice.
But he was saving the day for his establishment buddies.
Exactly. Right. Because here's the thing. I think a lot of people on the right knew all about what was going on, and they let it happen. And I think Barr was in there. What's the quickest way to stop an investigation from going where you want it to go? To be in charge of it.
Yeah,
right.
That's a great point.
So who got prosecuted? One guy. But here's the other thing. What about Durham? Right? Now
I was just about to ask you that. What do you, what do you think about Durham?
See, Durham, they could have had that Durham indictments before the election. I know how this works.
Yep.
If the AG says, I want these indictments by this day, they'd get these indictments.
Or at least an interim report. At least an interim report.
Right.
You know.
So by the fact when he said, well, we're not going to have it till after the election, that told me they never had an intention of indicting, because they knew after the election, if Trump lost, it would never. It will never see the light of day.
Immediately knew what side they were on when they.
And here's the other thing: they're talking about. Just the article came out the other day, all excited that Durham is doing grand jury. Let me tell your listeners this, and I know this by personal experience. You can go through all the way through grand jury, have all the testimony evidence put into grand jury. The last step, though, is you have to have the DOJ, either the U.S. attorney, or in this case would be the attorney general, sign off on the indictment before you can ask the grand jury to indict. They will have to say, look at all the evidence and you're right up and say, yes, I agree with that. You're on solid ground. Go for it. That's why it'll never happen. Because when he gives it to Garland's going to sit there and he'll never approve this. So it's going nowhere. We'll never see anyone held accountable.
Quick question. Do you guys think there's any possibility? It's been drawn out so long that I'm pretty skeptical at this point. Do you think there's any possibility of anything happening with any of the recount stuff, the forensic investigations, the election stuff?
No.
Okay, you guys have no hope for that stuff.
No.
I'm losing hope quick because I feel like we would have heard something by now. If there was something that they found.
Well, I think there's stuff out there, and I know there's a lot of irregularities. I don't think that there's any political will. I think that there's enough actors on both sides of the aisle that don't want it to come to light, and the judiciary is more activist than judges. And so you put all those together, we're never going to see anything. You don't think
it's not that there's anything to find. You just think that the stuff that there is to find is somehow going to be covered up well enough that we're never going to hear about it.
Exactly.
That is so disheartening to me. You know?
There's so many things in the election that were that legitimate questions, and I know people are saying that they're not legitimate.
Let's
no,
not
they are
get
legitimate
into this.
questions.
I don't want YouTube to cancel this video.
What's that?
I said I don't want YouTube to cancel this video. Let's not get into that. Whenever I talk about that stuff, I always talk about the planet of Turth and the election that they had between Donaldus J. Trumpius and Bo Jiden, and how that election was maybe doctored in some way. I don't talk about our election because that was perfect.
Way to go, YouTube, for supporting free speech.
Election.
Exactly.
Thank you for doing your part to protect free speech.
Yeah, we live. You guys, we're.
It's weird times.
We have devolved into some degree of fascism here. I mean, really, we have. I mean, it's unbelievable that we're not allowed to talk about politics.
And if people don't believe that, then they're not paying attention.
No, they're not paying. You know, it is really, truly now maybe fascism light, let's call it.
Yeah.
But it really is a kind of form of fascism now that we live.
Well, I mean,
crazy.
But that's how it starts.
That is how it starts, and I'm just hoping we can nip it in the bud. What do you guys think about 2022? What 2024? Do you have hope? Do you think? Because it looks to me, and Mark Vines gave me hope by saying that he believed that the Democrats are a bit scared because they kind of have recognized that what they've done is too obvious and too extreme, and they are afraid they're only going to be there for 4 years, so they're trying to push everything they can at the moment. And that gave me hope. And also, I think maybe the Democrats aren't quite as smart as the public might think they are. Like their plans are not quite as well formed as they should be in order to stay in power for as long as they want. I mean, they're obviously trying to push like HR1 and this kind of stuff to keep keep themselves in power. But all of their moves seem desperate and obvious, and so it looks to me like we're going to have some kind of landslide in 2022, and then again in 2024. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that we're going to take back the problem?
I think the problem that Democrats have is they were trying to push all this stuff through, but I just don't think even the Democrats realized how bad Joe Biden was.
Oh, you don't think so? So I have the thought that maybe they recognized that he was going to be a bit of a dumpster fire. So they thought, look, we can push anything we want through. The American public will get mad at us, but then we just put it on Joe Biden. He's a disposable cup. We fill that cup up with all of our dirty laundry, and then we toss him out after 4 years.
Oh no, I agree with you. I agree
clean.
that they thought that they could manipulate him, and he was. Yeah. And when he was in a better mental state, he was just going to be their puppet. But listen, Chris, it's actually gotten to the point where it's much worse than even they thought was going to happen. Like for example, he's on vacation and this in Afghanistan situation blows up. They bring him off of vacation just long enough to give a statement and then go back on vacation
without questions. And also, he went to bed the first night of the Afghanistan disaster. He went to bed early. Did you guys see that report?
Right. And then today,
like that, right?
And do you know that when I came on this show today, I was seeing reports that up to 12 Marines have been killed.
Yeah,
and when I came on the show, he still had not made a statement. I don't think the Democrats expected that, and even to my Democrat friends, like you, Chris, I have hardcore left friends. Even they are saying, "Oh my goodness, what in the world?"
Afghanistan's a wake-up call, if nothing else.
It is.
Sorry, Frank.
Here's the thing with Biden. This is the first time in probably his entire professional career that he exceeded people's expectations. Because we all thought he was going to be bad. I don't think anybody realized he was going to be this bad, to include the Dems. I agree with you, Chris. I think that they were saying, okay, this guy's disposable. If we have to, we'll jettison him and say it was all his bad ideas. And then they realized, holy smoke, Kamala really is an empty pantsuit. I mean,
she was. This is going to sound harsh, but she's a diversity hire.
Yeah,
she was brought in because they wanted to. Because the Democrats think, black people vote for black people. And Kamala Harris isn't really black, but let's pretend she is.
Right.
And women vote for women, so let's bring in the diversity hire so that everybody can relate to her and this kind of thing. And to me, it just seems like it's
here's a real scary thing.
If you respect black people, if you respect women, you don't use them as tools like that.
No.
To me, that is just so disgusting. And I'm sorry, Mark.
No. And I was going to say this, that for any listeners that are overseas right now, why this is a really, really big deal, and this is not even Mark Vines putting on my conservative hat, okay? I'm taking that off. I mean from somebody that studies world history, American history, European history, folks, what you are seeing happen right now is a pivotal moment in world history. This is not just Joe Biden being a buffoon. What you are witnessing over the last week is having a destabilizing effect on the world. And that includes all of you in Europe. That includes all of you in East Asia. If I'm Taiwan right now, I am worried. 3.5 more years of this. Who knows what's going to happen? This is very, very destabilizing. We're focused on Afghanistan right now, but we need to be focused on the rest of the world, because as of this week, the United States is not a world power right now. We are not in anybody's eyes.
Let me ask you two a question. Do you think Biden survives this? What do you think?
I think Afghanistan. I think he's going to stay in office. Yeah.
No.
I think they still need him. He's the easiest to manipulate, and if you want to control a president, I don't think it bothers the Democrats. It's better for them to have somebody that they can just.
I think the Democrats are going to do, and I know Frank, you and I've talked about this quite a bit. One thing I do, I mean, for all you Democrats that are out there that are listening to this program right now, I have a lot of respect for you guys and your ability to stick together and protect one another during the hard times. I really wish Republicans had that same ability to do it. And that's what's going to happen. Having control of the House and the Senate right now, they are going to rally around it because they're trying hard. They are trying so hard right now to defend Biden when it is there is no defense.
Well,
they'll stick through 2022.
The media is actually dumping on him a little bit. I know
a little bit,
but
not like the way they would have if this was Trump. If the same thing happened under Trump, that wouldn't be it wouldn't be as sugar coated as it is now.
Let me tell you.
Oh, definitely.
Here's my opinion on why the media is dumping on him. If you look at the media that's dumping on him, it's the foreign correspondents, the ones that spent time overseas. And you talked about the military-industrial complex. They're kind of part of that. Mm-hmm. And when you take away that little gig, you're kind of taking away from a piece of their pie. So I kind of think that they liked having the overseas excursions also.
Oh yeah.
And plus, they made connections there. They have friends there, and they have some connection to it. But I also think there is a certain level of some of these reporters in the foreign correspondence section of it that cover the Pentagon and overseas see this as they kind of like having this 20-year thing going on because they have something to go to.
Also, the military-industrial complex gets paid as long as we are in these occupations.
That's right.
And my theory is that you've got a lot of deep state players, right? People who influence the federal government, some of whom are like, we need to get out, and others of whom are like, no, we need to stay in. And I think there is a little bit of infighting there. What do you guys think? Do you think that's right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Now, let me finish up with this. We've been on for an hour. We're going to start to take questions.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you guys real quick. One answer, one word answers: optimistic, pessimistic, or neutral at this point.
Oh,
Mark?
Pessimistic.
About the country?
Mark's pessimistic. Yeah, about the country, about the future.
Pessimistic.
You're both pessimistic. I'm optimistic, but then again, I'm also a little bit delusional. A little bit like a leftist that way. All right.
Well, yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start taking questions. Anybody who has a question for these two guys, these are FBI veterans, retired FBI. You guys were, you guys are decorated. You guys were in top positions. These guys know what is going on in the federal government. Ask them whatever you want. Let's hear. Bison17 writes, will this be enough for the Marines to go full Myanmar and take our country back? So there's, people talk about this a lot, this idea of some kind of, bizarrely, revolution, some kind of civil war in America. People talk about it in sort of conspiracy circles, but some people, do recognize that eventually people are going to get fed up and there may be some kind of, and that's the only way I see it happening. The only way I see it happening is if the military goes in and they remove, some kind of corrupt officials or something like that. And we would have to have, I think, more obvious stuff going on than what's going on right now for that to happen. But it's a fair question. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Well, Frank, I'll jump in real quick. I was hearing some reports before I came on this show that there were individual units and individual soldiers and Marines that were taking some action, independent action. So I've already heard that, but that's at an individual level. I think your listener is
talking
looking
about Afghanistan, though. I'm talking about actually going into Washington,
You're talking about the country. Yeah.
So so on the individual level in Afghanistan, people are taking some action on their own. So when I'm sure we'll hear more about that. As far as I don't know. I don't think so, because the military, again, Frank and I were both in the military. That's just not how the level that we were at. That's just not what you do. All right.
We would have to be. I think we'd have to be like full communist.
Yeah, it would have to be that. What we need to have happen, and I'm doubtful that this is going to happen, is you generals, you flag officers right now in Washington, you guys need to step up. And if you cannot get this commander-in-chief to do the right thing by the American people, then you need to, if you have any self-respect, resign and then go out and talk about why you resigned. That's what you need to do.
It's a bold statement,
I don't know that
Mark,
I'm confident that it's going to happen, though.
I think you're 100% right. Frank?
Well, I can say this. I don't think it will happen, but I can say this. For everyone that thinks it would be a good idea, they just need to look at some photos or spend a little time on a combat field and realize this is the last thing we want to have happen. If there's any way to avoid it, we want to do that, because we have got the potential. We're on a powder keg as it is with the amount of people that are very upset, and a lot of ammo and a lot of guns out there, and things could get ugly really quick. We hope that doesn't happen. But honestly, though, I just don't think we have the will in us as a society anymore to do those type of things.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, Angela B., this is kind of a little bit off topic from what we have been talking about, but it's an interesting question. Angela B. says, if the FBI, I think this is a critical question because it looks like, especially with January 6th, conservatives are being targeted criminally for political reasons. So Angela B. writes, if the FBI were to want to show up at my home and question me for any reason, how should I respond?
Don't talk to them. Ask for an attorney.
Yep.
Don't talk to them. Ask for an attorney. Do not let them into your house. Do not talk to them. That's what I've heard from every lawyer I've ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
Subpoena me. Get a warrant. If you think that you have enough on me, go get a warrant.
And trust me.
Yeah.
And trust me, they'll be the nicest people in the world to try to get you to talk to them, and they, for all intents, still say no. Say, I have nothing to say to you.
It's very hard for people to be rude.
Yes.
I've heard that
yes.
Serial killers will, coerce people, and people will know something's weird, but they'll still be nice.
Absolutely.
Just because they're afraid of being polite and saying no and telling them to F off. And
that's right.
That gets people killed sometimes. And you guys would know about that. You've investigated these cases.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Don't do
it. Let's see here. I'm trying to find some more. Somebody said thank you for your service, but then somebody else said you guys are badged officers and gave a little flip-off symbol. So we got both sides here.
It wouldn't even be the first time today that happened.
No, these guys are good men. They're patriots, you guys. Mark Vines, Frank RUNLES. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Runnels. Yeah. Good men. These are good men. Bison17 says, you weren't in the woke military, ! LOL.
That wasn't woke when I was in.
No.
Not when I was in the military. No.
I mean, when I was in, some of the things said there would never pass muster now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Oh, I figured out how I can put these up. One group says, Ryan's two kids writes, Ryan's two kids, okay. Writes, why is Antifa being allowed to destroy Portland? I mean, that's a great thing. And I think that has something to do with the fact that that's really a state issue.
Well, it depends on what they're attacking. If they attack a federal building or a federal officer.
But that's the only thing that's been defended is the federal building.
Right. Then you have federal jurisdiction to do something. Otherwise, it's a state or a municipal type of thing. And they just, they don't have the cops there have been defunded. They've been abused unmercifully. Right. And why would you as a cop even take a chance?
Right. This comes down to, folks, elections matter. You need to look at the candidates, and the candidate, that is your governor. If you're talking about Oregon, it's your governor that's allowing that to happen.
Kate Brown, by the way, total flippant disaster. I'm from Oregon. Kate Brown is a disaster.
Yeah, so elections matter. And when Trump tried to defend the federal building out there, he took heat for it. And again, elections matter. People. I think people voted for Biden, not so much that they like Biden, but they voted against Trump, so they voted for Biden. And congratulations, here we are. Elections matter, folks.
This is a great question here. Alejandro Fonseca writes, with the CCP joining in with the Talisman, I believe he meant the Taliban, how much of a role does China play in everything?
I think it's huge.
I think it's all there.
I think China really wants the minerals that they have there in Afghanistan, because they have these precious minerals that they need for production of chips and all that stuff. So that's a huge windfall for China. It's huge.
Yep.
Really? So you guys actually think that they're interested in Afghanistan is really about mineral resources?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is. Yeah. I think it's a lot of that. Yes, because they have untapped mineral resources that China needs and it's a small price for them to pay to get it.
Yeah. I've heard that the Democrats look at that region and they say, well, Pakistan matters because they're a nuclear power. Afghanistan doesn't.
Right.
And so even though they got the Taliban, even though they've got, even though that's where 9/11, originated out of, there really just isn't that much of an interest in Afghanistan. So it's a sort of...
And that's part of what has been wrong with our foreign policy there, because we've been very deferential, far more deferential to Pakistan than Pakistan actually has earned or deserved. Right. And we've treated Afghanistan as if it's a backwater. And yes, it is a backwater in some respects, but that has kind of led us to be there for 20 years because of that. I mean,
we really haven't focused enough energy or thought maybe.
It's also a power play to humiliate the U.S.
Oh, for sure.
By China. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mark. Artisan Brick and Stone writes, Vietnam vet here. He says, what can we, the people, do to get this administration out of power besides sit and wait? Because we do have at least a year until we can start thinking about 2022, and 3 years. I mean, how early in the administration is this disaster? I mean, this is not just like a once in a presidential term, disaster. This is like maybe once in a lifetime disaster. This is a pretty huge.
Well, I'll tell you what needs to happen right now, and it's not going to happen with the Democrats in power. But people need to openly talk about impeachment. We impeached Trump twice for really things that were not crimes. And I've not heard anybody seriously talking about it right now, but it needs to be brought up, and people need to talk about this more often. But when the Republicans get the House and the Senate back in 2022, then they need to proceed forward. And this is not just coming from a conservative. This is coming from, guys, this is our survival that's on the line right now. The world is a very, very dangerous place. And again, today we're talking about Afghanistan, but we're going to be talking about China tomorrow. And we've got to get this administration is going to drive us into ruin, and that's the ruin for the rest of the world. And this, I can't emphasize that enough. Republicans, you need to start talking about impeachment.
But Mark, we're never going to impeach Biden. You know why? We get Biden out of office, who takes over? We get Kamala out of office, who takes over? So we can't impeach it until at least 2022. That's
not a reason not to do it, though. We deal with it. To me, it's sending the message. Because the one thing that it will send, the message it will send to Kamala Harris is, we got rid of this guy. Okay, this is not cutesy time anymore. The world is a very, very dangerous place. Either step up or get out of the way.
And we talked about that before the show. Like, it used to be kind of funny how incompetent Biden was. But since the Afghanistan debacle, since this quagmire we've got now, this is not funny anymore. This is deadly serious.
It is.
People are literally dying.
I don't even know what he would say. The commander-in-chief, typically calls or reaches out to the families of the service members that have been killed. If you're Joe Biden, how does that phone call work?
Yeah.
How does that work?
And we just saw the beginning of the death that could come from this. I think there's going to be a whole lot more. And after August 31st, man, who knows what we're going to see.
As soon as I heard about the Americans that were left behind, that there were Americans like stuck, immediately I was talking to people about, okay, how many people are going to die here? I mean, everybody just immediately knew, okay, this is looking like it's going south pretty quick. And, what do you say to that? Like, it's difficult because, I mean, you want the administration to look bad. You want them to be embarrassed. You want them to look foolish. You do not want them to make a mistake so badly that we're getting, American citizens, American troops killed like this.
Right. It's one thing. Yeah, it's one thing to be able to say, look at this idiot. This is like a whole nother plane.
This is depressing. I don't, and it's stressful because it's one of those things where I think as men, you typically you see a problem and you want to fix it.
Right.
This is one of those things where it's sort of like watching a documentary about like rapists. Like, I can't dive into the TV, find those guys, and punish them. You want to. You get this ferocity, I think, within you. Like, I want to go to Afghanistan right now and save everybody. But you can't. You're just stuck. It's like one of the most frustrating feelings in the world to watch this level of incompetence, and it didn't need to happen.
No.
It's just,
And then you watch a Washington press corps that does not press this man. And in fact, now he's not even standing on the podium long enough to be asked questions. And he's being allowed to get away with that.
I don't know. I mean, do you guys think that he should be answering questions, or do you think that because
absolutely.
why is Mark Milley even still have a job? Why does this guy still have a job? Why does Austin still have a job? Like, these guys, I think, need to be answering a lot of questions right now, and where the hell are they?
Right.
They're hiding in their basement now.
Yeah, they're in damage control mode at this point, all of them.
I'm looking for more questions. It's easier to see if it's a super chat. So if you guys have a couple bucks and you have a question, go ahead and post that. But a lot of these are comments that people are making. Numi's dad writes, "What does the FBI think?" This is an interesting subject because it's a little bit unrelated to what's going on right now, but it also speaks to the incompetence or corruption of the federal government. What does the FBI think of the wide open borders?
Well, I think agents that are working on the border, I've known a lot, and I worked a lot of drugs in my career. We have a flood of fentanyl coming in. This past year, we had 90,000 deaths from fentanyl. All of it coming, almost 90% of that coming from Mexico via China. And it is just, it's flooding the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So for agents, I know, for DEA and FBI, we both work drugs. They're swamped, and
sorry, continue.
And it's hard to keep up with it, and it's devastating their communities.
Now, I've heard that there's a way that the cartels are using this influx of immigrants to kind of mask their own activities. So
absolutely.
You've got the agencies completely, all their attention is taken up.
This administration has been the greatest thing that's ever happened to the cartels.
Yeah, they're making millions now.
Right.
Based
But
on...
I'm going to throw another thing in too. It's not just the cartels, but folks, this is a national security issue. Mm-hmm. If you think it's just drug cartels and coyotes bringing people through, if you think that's the only thing coming across the border, you're crazy. If we have another terrorist attack in this country, I mean, from international terrorists, this is on Joe Biden's hand because that border is open. It is open. And we're focused on, we immigrants coming across and children, the dreamers and all this kinds of thing. Well, terrorists are coming through too. Mm-hmm. Make no mistake about it.
Well, the funny, I always hear this argument that most, the terrorists in the past haven't come through illegally. They've come through legally and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, but how often do successful terrorist attacks follow a pattern of unsuccessful terrorist attacks or previous successful terrorist attacks? They don't. And the reason they don't is because the FBI or Homeland Security or whomever it is that's looking at these things, they see, okay, this is what's happened in the past. We've got to guard against that. So they're aware of certain tactics of terrorists. It's the new ideas that people don't recognize. And what we're trying to stop with closing off the border and, assessing everybody who comes through is we're trying to guard against new opportunities that we haven't even thought about in terms of terrorist attacks.
Let me put it to you this way: I remember long ago having a conversation with somebody about that. When your listener or your friend, whoever you're talking to, says, "Well, terrorists normally do this." Mm-hmm. I'm a pre-9/11 agent. Frank is a pre-9/11 agent. And if we had gone through the FBI Academy, and you're doing scenarios, and we would do, we would just do different scenarios to work, different problems. If you had come to me in 1999,
it's like a game theory type.
Yeah, right. And if you'd have come to me and said, "Okay, we're going to do an exercise right now, and we want to see what your plan would be to deal with this particular scenario." Okay, we come up with a scenario, and if you had taken what actually happened on 9/11 and said, "This is going to be our scenario for the day, and we're going to come up with plans to combat that," I would have looked at you and said, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah.
Well, how in the world would that? What, all these airplanes and all these people, and they come in and all these airplanes, they're going to take over. Like, they're going to go out and they're going to train. They're not going to learn how to land. They're going to take over these airliners and fly them into buildings. I would have said, why are you wasting our time? Why don't you give us a realistic scenario that we can train with. That's what I would have said pre 9/11, but that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
So when somebody says this isn't realistic that they're coming over the border, people are underestimating the terrorist ability to. The problem with us is they actually use our system and our goodness. Because I know a lot of the Democrats, it's like all these people want to come, have the American dream and all that, and they use our goodness against us.
Yeah.
We have laws in place. We have laws that we need to enforce, and we need to do that they're there for a reason. And by the way, that's another reason why Joe Biden should be impeached, is because these are not new things. We actually have immigration laws on the books, and he is in fact, all the governors that are trying to enforce our borders, he's going after the governors. Mm-hmm. So he's undermining our own system.
And I can tell you, I was in Iraq in 2007, and I remember having a conversation with an agent that was stationed in McAllen, Texas, but he was in Iraq with me. And he said at that time, this is in 2007, he says, literally every year they catch somebody or multiple people from every country on the watch list, even then. This was in 2007. Now, God knows how many people are coming through that are who knows what.
Because
from every bad country in the world.
Thousands of people flooding through thousands and thousands
every year, every month.
And I can tell you, that guy
that Biden's in office.
That guy from Yemen doesn't stand out from everyone else in that situation.
You're right. You're 100% right. Because there's a similar look
to
somebody from the Middle East and somebody from South America.
Yeah.
There is a similar complexion and this sort of thing. All right, let's see here. The I see no evil. They write, are the FBI actually looking at Antifa and ignoring them? How hard is it to get fired at the FBI? I mean, that's a great question. It's not just Antifa. It's Hunter Biden. It's the criminality of Joe Biden. There doesn't seem to be investigations, and if there are investigations, I saw Patrick Byrne. I don't know if you guys have seen this. Patrick Byrne talked about how the FBI approached him and said, we've got, you've helped us gather dirt on Hillary Clinton. We're not going to arrest her. We're going to use this information to control her once she's in office. That's what Patrick Byrne said. Now, who knows? Maybe Patrick Byrne's completely insane. But Patrick Byrne seems like a sensible guy to me. What's going on there? I mean, does the FBI actually look at Antifa and say, okay, we got to go after these people? Or do they say, we got to use these people? Or do they say, it's okay that what they're doing? I mean, what's going on there? And then to that point, what are they doing with the Hunter Biden information? What are they doing with the Joe Biden information? Why are they just completely ignoring every criminal on the left?
Well, with Antifa, once again, you have federal jurisdiction, you got local jurisdiction. The Antifa thing, unfortunately, is many times much more of a local problem than a federal problem. So we don't have unless they're traveling interstate, which they are, but we have to be able to prove they traveled interstate with the sole purpose of breaking a law. As far as the arrest, why are they not pursuing like the Hunter Biden thing? Mm-hmm. Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, I'm telling you, brother. If I was the agent that had that call from the guy from the repair shop, it would have been game on.
It's so bizarre that it's just all been swept under the rug, ignored.
Absolutely. I mean, remember Bobulinski talking about the big guy? Right. Yeah. Boy, did that go away, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Tucker tried. Tucker Carlson, man, what a guy. He's out there. He's working harder than these, FBI guys now.
Yeah. And that really is the sad part of all this for me and for Mike is that we know in our hearts of hearts, the agents that work out in, say, San Angelo, Texas, or Omaha, or Buffalo, New York, 99.9% of those guys are just trying to make a case or trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, the working agents are good men. It's the people that talk
about the problem. They are getting painted by the same brush as these bad actors that are saying, no, don't look at that laptop. We're not going to pursue that.
Right.
See, these are all decisions made at the headquarters level.
Right, and when you're talking about Antifa, and also BLM, Black Lives Matter, there just isn't, with the way that the organization is right now, you're not going to be an agent that says, hey, you know what, boss, I think we need to open a case on Black Lives Matter.
That'll never happen. Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Not in the environment that we're in. Because and I actually have to hand it to BLM. They were pretty smart about doing that. What you did was you put Black Lives Matter. That's your title, but you're really a criminal organization. Yeah. You are really a racist organization. You're really a Marxist organization. Yeah. And by the way, you do use force and violence to further your goals.
I mean, the thing is,
nobody will touch it.
And if I was going to work the Black Lives Matter, I would work that as a RICO case because they are a racketeering organization.
She stole all that money.
Yeah, that is a racketeering organization, and they use violence and intimidation for the purpose of that. That's a Hobbs Act racketeering case.
But in this environment, there's no agent out there that will touch that.
Yeah, or nobody prosecutor. Will. No prosecutor will touch it.
Patrice Kahn-Cullors is the name of the woman who started that organization, and she has clearly stolen money.
She's done very well for herself.
All right, Bison. Oh, sorry, excuse me here. Bison17, who has written us already today, says Bill Binney is the man. What's up with the Whitmer plot? 12 of the 18 were informants? ? The SAC was promoted to DC in charge of January 6th. WTF? Now we've talked about this, but do you guys want to respond to this question?
Oh, that's a good question.
Who's Bill Binney? Who's Bill Binney?
I don't know who Bill Binney is.
I don't either.
But what's up with the Whitmer plot? 12 of the 18 were informants. The SAC was promoted to DC in charge of January 6th.
And see, and that comes back to, was there undue influence? Was there entrapment? By having that many informants and undercovers in an organization of that size, you by just the sheer numbers have dominated the organization.
You're talking about the Whitmer plot. Yeah.
Right. So at that point, is it of their free will? Are they predisposed or are you dragging them along?
Are you grooming them? Is this entrapment?
Right.
I don't know what the SAC is. What's the SAC?
Special agent in charge.
Yeah, he was a special agent in charge of the Detroit office, and he got promoted to be the SAC of the Washington field office, which is a much bigger field office. So same position, but bigger. It's like, going.
Now, why was he promoted to DC in charge of January 6th? Did you guys read about that?
Oh yeah. Well, why?
Well, it goes back to, remember Frank said earlier. Remember how Frank said that by you attach yourself to a big case.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that ensures that you get promoted. So going from Michigan to DC is, although it's not technically a promotion, it kind of is positionally, because moving, because that's the pathway to move up. So obviously this is somebody that you have to be very careful with agents that are making their career by making a name for themselves in cases. And by the way, let me address, because I know Frank addressed it, but I'm going to give you my little take on that as well, because you see this dynamic happen in a lot of offices. I know when I worked cases, and I was the case agent on a number of undercover operations, and it was funny, you could never get anybody to help you out if it was a heavy lift. Big case, and undercover cases usually are a heavy lift. Whenever you need surveillance done, nobody's available. If we're going to do a T3 wiretap, nobody's available. There's paperwork that needs to be done, nobody's available. But
unless
then when you get to the end,
profile.
But even then, while you're working the case, people don't. There's not a whole lot of volunteer.
Really?
Nobody wants to work on Friday nights and Saturday nights. But when you get to the end, and it looks like there's going to be arrests and there's going to be search warrants and there's going to be a big splash, then people come out of the woodwork and they all want to be a part of it. Now, the reason why they want to be a part of it is because then later, when they write their FD-954, which is the application for a different job, they can write that they were a part of that operation that went well.
And people recognize it. Right?
They recognize it.
It's sort of like being associated with a famous person or something.
Exactly.
You're basking in the reflected glory of the case.
Right.
Exactly.
So what Bison 17 is suggesting here really is that this SAC was promoted to DC so that he could do on January 6th what he had done with the Whitmer case. I think that's his suggestion.
Yeah,
what you guys are saying is that maybe just because of the high-profile nature of the case, that got him the promotion, and maybe January 6th was maybe incidentally similar to Whitmer,
Yes.
that it wasn't planned to be the
Yes.
same as the Whitmer case.
Right. I think that's safe to say. I mean, going along
But it
that
could
same
be either way, really.
right,
Good.
but going along that same lines, going back to Peter Strzok. Now, Peter Strzok, when he was involved with the Clinton email scandal, and he did the interview with Clinton on July 5th, he was a section chief. Okay, that's the lowest level of executive. Within a month, now he'd only been a section chief for about 8 months at that point. Within a month, he was promoted to deputy assistant director, a big jump. Why? Because there was one thing that happened, that was the exoneration of Hillary Clinton. Now, was it a quid pro quo? I don't know, but boy, that's a meteoric rise for a guy that, by and large, was pretty unimpressive overall.
Right.
You know what it looks like this is culminating in is this general consensus that there's just a lot more corruption than I think we would like to admit or we want to even see. And it's not maybe systemic, but it's definitely
There's a lot of good old boy back rubbing, wash my hands, your hands, you take care of me.
Sure.
Brother-in-law deals that go on far, far too often. That's the problem with the FBI, and it goes back to that one question: how hard is it to get fired? It's actually pretty hard to get fired from the FBI. You can do it, and if you become disfavored, they'll make it a lot easier. But if you're one of the favored ones, it's almost impossible to fire you, and that's part of the problem, because there's a lack of accountability held for people, and our promotion system is set up in such a way that it's like Tammany Hall,
Right.
more so than a meritocracy.
Wow.
And you can promote your friends, because you notice goes from and
We're losing you, Mark. You want to say that again?
when you in one position FBI, what's funny is you actually see people that they've worked with over the years come with them. Like if you go down to the
when
FBI
somebody gets
Academy,
promoted, they bring up all their
they
friends.
bring all of their
Yeah.
friends. So Frank mentioned Peter Strzok. Well, you notice just in reading you can, even the layperson can look at sort of the timeline and what was being said. You noticed how intimate all of these people were. They all knew, and then they were cases, and then Mueller puts together his team. Did you notice that it's like the same team that was out in Texas? Then they all came to Washington. Then they all went over to Mueller's team, and it's always the same names that are together. Because
So you're saying the advancement protocols, the way people get promoted in the FBI, that whole system really needs to be reformed.
yes.
Oh, God, yes. Absolutely.
God, yes. Because what happens is I get promoted to, let's say I'm a deputy assistant director, and I need a section chief under me, or I need a unit chief below me. Well, guess what? I have influence over the promotion boards, and I know, and you can go, and I've seen this done over I need Frank. I want Frank on my staff. Well, we have to put together a board. Legally, you have to put together a board, but it's kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. Frank is my guy. Okay,
So there
Frank
are
is gonna be
protocols that should work, but they don't.
They
Right.
don't work because they're not enforced.
Right.
Wow. Well, golly, yeah, that is very disheartening, and hopefully we get Trump back in there and we can talk to him and we can and fix this. I'm gonna bring it back to Afghanistan real quick. Artisan Brick and Stone is back, and she says she's a female Vietnam combat medic, and she says this Afghanistan bull has thrown me right back. I mean, I think it's thrown us all back. This is pretty. I mean, I expected there to be failures with the Biden administration. I did not expect it to be this intense this soon. She says, "What about our military? Can they not take over? Can they not take over?" I mean, that's a great question, really. Can they not take over what's going on in Afghanistan? I mean,
Well,
Joe
I
Biden
think
is not a commander.
Do you mean is the question, what can our military not take over?
That's my guess. I mean, she says, "What about our military? Can they not take over?" I'm guessing operations in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think that's what she's saying is operationally, can they not just basically say, okay, this is what we're going to do? Here's the thing. Good commanders succeed even when everything is against them, because they just say, listen, I'm going to throw the book out and this is what we're going to do. That's that. Now, are they going to get court-martialed? Are they going to get fired? Are they going to get maybe? But then again, the choice between I let 5,000 people get slaughtered or I get court-martialed, I'll take the court martial.
Yeah, we just don't have bold, brave commanders right now.
No.
Or enough.
You have to be willing to be a commander that says, you know what? I welcome the court martial because that means I'll be in court and I will get to explain what you guys did to us. We just don't have people with those kahunas anymore.
We do have people in the military like that. They may just not be in the
right positions.
Not at the flag level, we don't.
Well, see,
it's the positions that need to be held by those people aren't being held by those people.
The company commander or the platoon leader or the first sergeant might believe that and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Problem is they don't have any power to make the rest of the unit do it. They can only control 20 or 30 people or maybe 60 people.
All right, so another question, and this is about taking over the government. I'm telling you guys, people are talking about this. Josh, oh my gosh, writes, when are the American people legally supposed to take up arms against these tyrants if the military won't? My response to that originally was, I don't think that kind of thing will ever happen unless we go full communist, unless we something like that.
We're not close enough. Yeah, we're not close enough to that. Yeah. It's good. I mean, literally, it could happen, but things would have to get. We think it's bad now. It'd have to get 100 times worse, I think, because
I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't think people just have the stomach for that.
Definitely not. I mean, you and I, we've all been saying here that you don't want to see that. You really don't want to see that. You do not want that to happen. So we're hoping it doesn't.
If there was ever a time for people to go and protest at the Capitol and at the White House, it would be right now. What surprises me, and I was talking to Frank about this the other day, I'm kind of surprised that we aren't not seeing protests around the White House right now. Demanding it. Now, I think January 6th and how people were treated after January 6th has a lot to do with why.
But also, Republicans aren't prone to protest typically.
No.
That's our MO. Vegas Girl writes, Biden just spoke and blamed the Afghanistan quagmire on Trump.
That's all they got. That's all they got. That's all they got. I mean, where else
Vegas
can they
Girl
go?
for that news update, by the way. That is, of course,
as we're sitting here, so for Vegas Girl, that's news to us. I'm not surprised, but this blaming it on Trump is only going to go so far, though.
Oh no!
I don't think people are buying it anymore.
No, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he's switched to becoming a Republican, really not because of Trump, but because the left has gone so far left. They've gone so crazy. Right. He cannot. He's like, look, I cannot indulge this racism against white people. He's Mexican. He's gay. And he's like, I'm going to start voting Republican because I just can't stand this racism against white people. I can't stand the sexism against men anymore. And but his father, who's also a diehard Democrat, right? He's a Mexican American. He came over here from Mexico many, many years ago. And his father has now started to vote Republican because he was so disgusted with how the left treated Donald Trump. And he said, look, he's a sensible guy, his father. And he said, look, I may be a Democrat, but I can see that they're lying about Donald Trump here. And so to your point, this blaming Trump really can only go so far. People will see that it's ridiculous.
I don't think it's going to wash.
Thank you for that news update, Vegas Girl. We definitely appreciate that.
Wow.
We're not watching the news right now, so we can't update you guys. So that's nice.
Who thought that after January that we'd be sitting here today in August dealing with this fiasco?
Nobody.
I'm absolutely stunned at how disastrous this administration has become.
Yeah. Well, this is why a lot of us are suspecting that this is some kind of sabotage, that someone within the deep state, somebody in the system decided this has to be a messy withdrawal. We don't want it to be clean because we want to be able to stay in occupied countries so that we could keep making money for the military-industrial complex. That's why a lot of us suspect that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that because who would have the stomach to say, okay, let's withdraw from another hot spot after all this? There would be such a hue and cry. That, there is something to that.
But you know what, Chris? So. But we've got to have our leaders, all of our congressional leaders right now, all the elected officials in Washington right now, after hearing what we just heard from Vegas Girl right there, you guys need to step up to the plate And this is the time for leadership right now as we speak.
Yeah. Yep.
And
yep.
you guys
all the
need
Republican
to get
leaders
up
anyway.
and stand up to this.
Yeah. All right. So Heinrich G. I think this is a South African krona. Is that what this is? He says, read up on Bill Binney. He's one of the good guys. His system prevented the mass surveillance of today. That's nice.
Yeah,
That's good.
I have to look that guy
Bill
up
Binney.
then.
Yeah.
Bill Binney's a real popular guy that I've never heard of.
I think it was the same.
Yeah.
The same viewer.
Same guy. Yeah.
check it out.
He's answering my question.
Exactly. You asked who he was. Let's see. Angela B writes, is there any chance, let me post that here. Is there any chance that Ashley Babbitt's family will get answers to their daughter's death? How can we trust law enforcement when they aren't accountable? Wow. Great question, Angela B.
No,
What do you guys
I think it's gonna be a total whitewash. I think there'll be a civil case that'll drag on for years and years and years.
Yeah.
They may get some satisfaction from that, but it'll be so far in our memory that.
Do you think the Republicans, when they get in office, they're going to maybe try to help that out?
I would like to think they would, but boy, I just don't have a lot of faith in the Republicans anymore. You know, and that's why it goes back to what Mike was saying, or Mark was saying earlier, is about the elections. Well, that's why you have to elect guys that are not the establishment rhino types. Get some firebrands in there that are willing to kick down the walls and say, we're not playing the McConnell, McCarthy type of nonsense. This get along stuff. We need renegades in there right now.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like when the Tea Party came along, that was really the goal, is to get out the establishment guys who were like complicit with deep state garbage and say, we're not going to deal with this anymore. If you're a Republican, you better not be indulging in this crap. You really have to be a representative for the people. And I think some people got that message, but there are still people, I think, in the Republican Party that do want to be involved in that deep state establishment crap. And I think when Trump came in, that was a real message, and it scared the hell out of a lot of people.
And if people look back, who actually crushed the Tea Party, it wasn't the Democrats, it was the Republicans. The Republicans are the one that demonized the Tea Party. They hated them. You know,
they called them racist and everything. I knew Tea Party people. They were not racist. Okay, they were just good Christians. They wanted to reform the Republican Party. Good people.
They were
Matt Deckard.
They were the embryonic MAGA people. They were the very first signs of it.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely real constitutionalists. Matt Deckard, who I happen to know personally, writes, Ghislaine Maxwell, or Ghislaine, I don't remember how to pronounce her name. Ghislaine?
Ghislaine?
I don't know.
I think it's Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell. She's still alive, right?
Well,
what do you guys think of the Epstein thing? Do you think Epstein killed himself?
No.
you know what? I
Absolutely not.
That was a beautifully concise answer. I love it.
I do know this. Okay, I know this.
Yeah.
Part of my background, which we did not cover, there's no way your audience is going to know every little detail of every little thing.
I didn't want to get into the details about you. You guys sent me your resumes ahead of time, but I was like, I don't want to let all your secrets out. But
well, one of the things that you need to know about me is I actually did work as a corrections officer for a short period in my career. So I've, with Epstein being locked up, I have experience in dealing with that. And somebody that's as high profile as he is, and particularly with his mental state, with what he was being accused of, and knowing the information that he had on people, I know the facility I worked in, somebody like that was never left alone at all, ever. Yeah. They didn't go to the bathroom.
He wouldn't have let him commit suicide unless they wanted him to commit suicide.
Right. We were eyes on those, and we had a number of people in the facility I was at that were, different characters, but for different reasons they needed to be watched. They are never not watched. Okay, so how the hell he got in the position where he was able to hang himself? And by the way, when you do the slow hanging like he did, because it wasn't like a long drop where it snapped his neck. That's not what he did. It was a suffocation. You guys understand that takes quite a long time to do.
Right, and
so he was alone for a long time.
You would break your bones doing
it. And when they have those suffocations, they always have those last minute regrets, and they try to get out of it. And, there'll be signs where there's clawing and all that stuff. None of that was present. This guy, he was done in. He was whacked. He was whacked.
If this asphyxiation takes longer than people think.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, they had several mistakes or several failures of
all,
the system.
All at the same time, yeah.
Yeah, all at the same time. And what Mark, you're saying is you'd be surprised if there was one failure in
no,
the security.
Because where I work, because that's the big fear of every corrections officer, particularly a very, very high profile person, is you just want to get through your shift with nothing happening, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be that guy. Okay, I may hate this. You have opinion. You have your own opinions about the prisoner, right? Mm-hmm. But the one thing you don't want is you don't want them to die on your watch. You do not. You are not dying on my. Now, I don't care what happens to you on the next watch, but you're not dying on my watch, right? So I can't imagine how he was left alone that long for that to be allowed to happen. It's just fishy. It just is.
I love getting your guys' insight on this stuff. All right, Bison17 is back. He says, go back and look up your history. What was the attitude of the elites and ruling class globally before and during Hitler's rise? Why let it get that bad? And not just Hitler, but the Soviet Union and there's any kind of a government in which you get this kind of corruption early on. And this kind of arrogance early on, and these kinds of ideas of the consolidation of power, it's not a good sign.
So it's interesting that this is asked, because I've been looking at that a lot recently. When you since this person mentions Hitler in reference to World War II, for you to understand the Second World War, you really have to go back and understand the end of the First World War to understand why the Second World War happened, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so at the end of 1918, Versailles Treaty was signed in 1919, actually. So then Germany invades Poland in 1939. So that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time
20
from
years.
1919 to 1939. And Germany was not allowed to have any, but it was a very small standing army that they were allowed to have. They were not allowed to have a navy. They were not allowed
and they were paying a lot of money.
Right. They were not allowed to have stuff. But
you're kind of breaking up. You want to just pause for 1 second.
Yeah,
Okay. I think you're back.
Yeah. All right. So do you have me now? So when you think about how were they weren't allowed to have any arms, a navy, and a small, like 100,000 man army, no more than that. But yet they were able to create a force that was very formidable, very threatening to the entire planet. How did that happen? Well, it happened because, like what your listener just mentioned there, is that an awful lot of people turned their head. You cannot tell me that the world did not see Nazi Germany building up its military might over that period. And there were a lot of people that turned their eyes, and there's a lot of people turning their eyes right now. But for me, it comes back to, this is not insurrection. It's not taking over the government. It is, folks, you need to understand elections matter, and you must vote. You must get out and vote and get these people out of here.
Norm Macdonald has a great joke. He says everybody's worried about the Russians, or everybody's worried about China or whatever. He's like, there's only one country I worry about, Germany. He says Germany back in the early 20th century, they decided to go to war, and who did they pick as their nemesis? The world.
Yeah.
And he goes,
well, I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that actually worried about us destroying ourselves.
That's right. But the thing is, because Germany's a relatively small country, and he goes, you think that'd be real quick, right? Germany against the world. He goes, but actually, no, it was kind of close. And then he says, then they did it again. They went to war again, and who did they pick again as their nemesis?
Chris, let me share with you something kind of funny. I had I taught at the FBI National Academy, and I had a German student. And I always, when I was there, I was always wearing an American flag. And he came up to me one day, the student, and he says, Mike, I see that you like to wear you always wear an American flag. You're very proud of your country. And I said, yes, I am. You can even see the flag here. I said, I am very proud of it. And I said, well, I mean, is that a problem? I mean, what about you? Aren't you proud of your country? And he says to me, yes, Mike, but in Germany, when we start waving too many flags, all of Europe gets very nervous.
Well, that's the weird thing. The Democrats think that that's going to happen with us. And I would say this. I was talking about this with my wife yesterday. I said, look, I'm a nationalist. I am definitely a patriot. I'm proud of this country. the sad thing about that is you do have to keep that mentality of, I can't just assume that because America is the greatest nation in the world, that it's always going to be the greatest nation in the world. I have to step back and say, I have to be willing to divorce myself from this faith I have in the country and this loyalty I have to the country if it ever goes far enough south, like if it goes bad enough. Like I'll always be loyal to the America that I believe in, but I'm not sure I'll always be loyal to the America that we will become if the Democrats continue to push us toward this sort of fascist state, push us toward communism. And that is a very dire thought for me. But I expect, and I really desperately hope that I will always be able to be loyal to this country and love this country, because it is the greatest country probably ever in the history of the world.
Everyone needs to remember that throughout history, there's been a lot of pinnacle nations: Rome, Greece, England, Spain. At one point in time or other, they were the one lone superpower.
Yeah,
we are that now.
Yeah.
Why do we think we're immune to falling like the rest of them?
Exactly right.
We're
Or
not.
corruption.
We're
or
not.
corruption. And I would say that, and the kind of the point I'm trying to make here, I guess, is that if this country falls into fascism or falls into some kind of authoritarianism or some kind of corruption, I really don't think it's going to be our side that pushes it there. The Democrats are always saying, be afraid of the conservatives. They're all fascists. They're all fascists. It's like, come on, you guys, it's the devil pointing at Christ and saying he's the bad guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's not. All right, let me read this from Matthew Kadish. This is a buddy of mine. He's got a podcast called The Salty Nerd. If you're a nerd and you like pop culture, watch Matthew Kadish's show. He says, what can we do to protect our elections going forward? And I think we're going to have to wrap up here in the next 4 minutes. So what do you guys think?
Well, I think a lot of the state legislatures have to make sure they tighten up on their election laws. Secondly, do not let the COVID BS convince everybody that, we have to have mail-in votings and we can't vote in person. That has to be done away with. That's why COVID, they're not letting that go, because they want to ride this out a little bit long. Everyone has to just reject that.
It's sort of like what Hitler did, right? Hitler said, look, the communists are taking over. I need emergency powers. Give me all
That's
that
exactly
power.
what he did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
One person, one vote. We have one election day. Starts at 7 a.m. It ends at like 8 o'clock at night. You show up, you show an ID, and you vote. That's it.
That's the
how it
one
should
thing.
be.
The one good thing COVID has done is it's ripped back the curtain on all of these political machinations, all the way from the school boards on up, to let people know that you really got to keep an eye on these people, because they're not doing you any favors a lot of times.
COVID and Trump together, I think, really exposed a lot of the corruption.
Yeah.
All right, Sandra Mass writes, Biden also threw the military under the bus, said that he asked for their input, and he followed the recommendations. What BS?
Yeah, there's no way they recommended this.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This right here, and thank you, Sandra, for your question, or your statement, rather. If what you were saying is true, and Sandra, I have no reason to believe that it's not. If this is true, then there should be resignations tonight.
Yeah,
firings.
Absolutely. If there are if this is true, if I'm Millie or anyone else, and the president of the United States just said that about me and it was untrue, then you, General Milley, you must resign.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that if they feel that they've been falsely accused of giving them bad recommendations, they need to resign in protest. Yeah.
Resign immediately.
Or as Chris said,
happened.
and if it is true, they should be fired. Right. If it's true.
No, but this is Biden truly throwing them under the bus. General Milley and all the rest of you, you need to resign now and go to the press and say that is absolutely a lie.
Well, Frank makes a good point. Like, if Biden's saying that the military gave him the suggestion, don't say the military gave me the suggestion. Just fire them. And if he's lying, the military should say, no, I didn't. I'm quitting. I'm resigning.
Right.
Let's see. Salty Ball here says Hitler never won an election like Joe Biden did. I'm not sure Joe Biden ever won an election like Joe Biden did.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure that Joe Biden knows where. And actually, there's truth. If you study the Nazi Party, whether you like it or not, they actually did win the election, and then Hitler took over. There's still a lot of doubts about.
Well, Hitler didn't
what
win
happened.
an election, though. He just kind of took over. But all right, well, I think we're almost at 2 hours, so I'm going to cut it off. I think that this has been incredibly valuable. Mark, Frank, you guys are really hidden gems here in this country. I think you have a lot to offer, and probably not a lot of people have picked your brains enough. I know some of the stuff you guys have talked to Tucker Carlson about, and you got some stuff on his show, which has been censored by YouTube, by the way. But yeah, you guys
Way
are
to go,
getting the
YouTube.
word out there. Yeah, way to go, YouTube. But you guys are getting the word out there. Mark, why don't you tell us what your podcast is called and where people can find you?
Yeah, so it can be found on any of the podcast platforms. It is called The Mark Vine Show. Frank has been on it a few times. Chris, we got to have you on the show.
Yeah,
Gotta have
I'll
you
come
on
on
there.
soon. Yeah.
And so some of the things that we talked about regarding the FBI, the promotion systems, and how that works. If you go back to some of the early episodes, Frank is on there. There's some other retired agents as well, and we talk about it. So if you want a bit more kind of behind the scenes, how the promotion system works, check that out. And Frank has a great podcast as well. Frank.
Yeah, Mark. I've listened to some of Mark's content, and it's really detailed. It's really good stuff. It's really good stuff. And Frank, where can they find you? Where can they watch your show? You have a podcast as well.
Yeah, my podcast is called Lies People Tell with Frank RUNLES. It's a combination of topical subjects. I spend a lot of time making fun of the left, which they give you lots of ammunition, and just go over different subjects every week to sort of keep a pulse on what's going on, and try to keep it light and fun. But I mean, this past week's been kind of tough to do. But please, it's the Lies People Tell. Just join us on that. You can pick us up anywhere you get podcasts.
Lies People Tell for Frank, and the Mark Vines podcast for Mark. You guys
Or the
please
Mark
follow those.
Vine Show, yeah.
The Mark Vine Show. And one last super chat real quick. This is from Heinrich G. He's from South Africa, I believe. He says, you Americans should be more introspective about allying with Stalin, who murdered tens of millions before the war and grew into a superpower with American help. Trust us, Heinrich. We do think about that quite often. And not the best thing that we ever decided to do. But at the time, World War II, Russia did crush the Nazis, so
yeah.
it was a little bit of a difficult situation, but we did eventually figure out that Russia wasn't really our friend, didn't we? So yeah, no, we do think about that. That's not something that we're completely ignorant of.
Yeah. Well, none of us here are pro-Stalin, I don't think.
No, none of us are pro-Stalin.
I think he forgets that like we had to do what we had to do to get one war over with, and then we immediately started fixing them too. Immediately,
we were worried even during the war. We were worried about Stalin even during the war. All right, well, that's it for all of us. Thanks again, you guys. Thanks to all the viewers. Thanks for everybody who put questions to these guys. And I really feel like this was valuable, at least for me, if not for our viewers. And as always, remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that is not so. All right, thanks again, guys, and good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.